During 1976 and 77, Ben and I recorded hundreds of hours of tape preserving the sound of the long-distance network. In the process, we overrepresented rural areas, the reason being that we wanted to call every toll center in the United States and Canada, and we did. Of course, most toll centers are rural and are used to connect to mostly small step-by-step offices. So rural, small step-by-step offices are vastly overrepresented in the hundreds of hours of tapes we have. That leaves the cities underrepresented, so I've had to go out of my way to concentrate on the sound of calling urban America, especially northern urban America, because the northern cities had two unique kinds of switch, number one crossbar and panel switching, that you didn't see in Canada or in any other part of the U.S. Here's a list of the cities that had panel and number one crossbar. These are the so-called northern urban cities. Boston and Providence had panels, but Connecticut was step-oriented. Southern New England Telephone. New York Telephone had number one crossbar and panel in Buffalo and New York City, also Southern Westchester right near New York City, and Nassau County had crossbar 1. Northern New Jersey near New York City, including Jersey City and Newark, had panel and crossbar 1. Southern New Jersey near Philadelphia also. Then there was Philadelphia itself and Pittsburgh. Baltimore was a number one crossbar panel city, as was Washington, D.C., and there was even a panel in Arlington. Cleveland and Cincinnati were northern urban cities, that is, panel and crossbar 1. The rest of the cities in Ohio were step cities. Chicago was a northern urban city, as was Milwaukee, and let's not forget Detroit. And there may have been some crossbar 1 in places like East St. Louis, Illinois. St. Louis was northern urban, so was Kansas City and Omaha. Then out west you had Oakland, San Francisco, and Seattle. And it turns out San Jose had a number one crossbar office, at least one of them. I didn't know that until I found it on one of the tapes preparing this program. And that's pretty much it for the northern urban cities. Now, in putting together this long-distance series, to round out the picture, I'm going to have to include New York and northern New Jersey. But I lived in the New York area until 1977, so there weren't any long-distance calls being recorded to New York City and northern New Jersey. Those were local and short long-distance calls. So to get long-distance to New York, we're going to have to go farther away. How about Atlanta? In 1978, I had a step line and a number one ESS line in Atlanta. I'm sure you can guess which of those two lines I would prefer to use. In 1970, dialing 1 from here went on a wire trunk downtown to good old 4044, the crossbar tandem. Obviously, that's not the case now. That reorder is coming from Rockdale TSPS, which didn't exist in 1970. It cut me off. Let me dial 1 again. This is second generation T-carrier.
Your number?
873-5781.
Thank you.
We're sorry, your call cannot be completed as dialed. Please check the number and dial again, or call your operator to help you. This is a recording. 4041. We're sorry.
This is the recording from the Rockdale 4A, the regional center for the area, and that's my long-distance access from the 87 step. Unfortunately, it goes through T-carrier, which ranges from horrific to merely unpleasant.
Cannot be completed as dialed. Please check.
Yes, I hung up because I'm not going to use the step line for preserving the long-distance network. The T-carrier to Rockdale puts everything through that fuzzy stuff, and it's just unnecessary to suffer that, because there is an alternative, and that is my ESS line. It's too bad. I really want to do things on my step line, and if you listen carefully, There's a double ringing line in the neighborhood. Now, in 1970, this ESS was 892, my grandma's house, and it had direct trunks to the Atlanta 4A.
404-2.
Wire trunks sounded great. Then they sectorized Atlanta, divided it among 3 switching machines: Rockdale,
404-1.
Atlanta Downtown,
404-2.
and the Northwest 4A.
404-6.
Right. And somehow, despite the proximity to downtown, this neighborhood ended up on Rockdale through T-Carrier. So when I went back to Grandma's house in 1973, there was a new toll tandem on T-Carrier. I even recorded the Virginia area code recording from there.
There are now 2 area codes in Virginia. The area code for the number you dialed is 804. Please dial 804 and the number you wish. This is a recording, 4041.
That was the big telephone news of 1973. Now in 1977, when the 4E, a bigger switch with more capacity, came in, fortunately this ESS got put on the 4E. The T-Carrier now is brand new, so long distance sounds pretty good on this ESS line. Anyway, here's a call to a Brooklyn panel, actually several, from the Atlanta 88 ESS through Atlanta 4E
404-3C.
to New York 4 4M
2122.
to the panel. New York 4 uses an auxiliary sender just like a 4A. Many of these Brooklyn panels make a noise while the kata is going on that sort of adds to it, so it's not as clearly audible, but it's still an interesting bunch of sounds, maybe even more so. Okay, we're starting out kind of weird because panel does ring to busy. That's normal. But normally the ring attenuates the busy signal until it trips. This time it didn't. Let me show you what it really is supposed to sound like. There, that was what you normally hear. When you hit the line between rings, you hear the busy signal in the background because of the attenuation being used to cut down the ring current so it doesn't blast your ears. But on that first call, there was no attenuation. Let's call that office that has that problem again. Wow, I had to turn down the volume. We're hitting an incoming trunk to this panel that doesn't attenuate the ring at all. So the full 90-volt signal is coming back toward New York 4. Let's call again, see if we can get a trunk with normal ring attenuation. Okay, mission accomplished on the attenuated ring. This is how it ought to sound. But this time, even though we're in the middle of the night, New York 4 rerouted the call through Brooklyn Tandem. And by the way, that's very hard to pick out by ear, because when that happens, you hear tick of going into Brooklyn Tandem, and then kind of a crunch of Brooklyn Tandem cutting through after the RP process. We're on Atlanta 4E, New York 4 MFing 7 digits to Brooklyn Tandem, which is RPing with the destination panel, and now it's done. Brooklyn Tandem is a crossbar tandem, but on an RP call, crossbar tandems often don't go ta-da-da. They just do something like that. Right now my phone's hung up. We're still listening to the line and it's dead silent. That shows this recording was made at night. Anyway, what's next is an example of how the Brooklyn semi-automatic intercept system should work.
Elevator 81, what number you calling?
434-9950.
434-9950.
The correct number for the business office is 875-9950. This is a recording. The number is 875-9950. If you are not calling the telephone company business office, please consult your directory and dial again.
First operator 140, for number you're calling?
434-9950.
434-9950. Thank you. Are you trying to call the business office, sir?
Trying to find out what the correct number is.
Okay, the correct number is 875-9950.
Okay, I'll call it tomorrow. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's the way it's supposed to work. Unfortunately, and especially at night, operators will talk to their friends and just press the release key. What it sounds like when they're doing that is what follows.
You did your Christmas shopping?
Please repeat the number you are calling to the special operator.
Oh, you mean the small people that left?
That used to happen every day, as Ben and I can attest. Yeah, they would just sit there pressing release. There were two modes. One was called ONI, that's where they said, "What number are you calling?" In the other mode, CIB, they would say special operator. If they bothered to listen and got a number, they'd go off the line and let the machine tell them the report and then repeat it to the customer. We never found out what CIB stood for. Caller is back? I don't know. On the next call, New York 4 encounters a problem revertive pulsing to one of the panels. Ah, the sounds of the long-distance network. This is a reorder that's obviously coming from a 4A or a 4M. The ticks you're hearing at the beginning and end of some tones make that apparent. While most 4As and 4Ms have ticks on every tone. The one we have just heard from New York 4 was so distinctive that Bill, sometime during the 1980s, mentioned it to me.
So the
the typical clicks,
oh, always.
Yeah.
4A reorders always have the clicks.
Not always. New York 4 didn't all the time. Like, bop, bop, dot, dot, bop, 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 dot, 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 bop, bop. It couldn't make up its mind.
Newark, New Jersey had panels too, though by 1978 it may have only had the last panel in the network, Bigelow 3 and Bigelow 8, in the Avon Avenue building, a building which ended up being just abandoned, with adjacent central offices taking over. Here are some calls to the Newark panel from my Atlanta 88 ESS line, via Atlanta 4E,
404 3C,
Newark 4A,
2012.
which goes directly to the panels. This tone is actually created by the supervision test equipment. It borrows the reorder timing and the continuous ring from the central office power and operates relays to make this very pretty tone that sounds like it's coming from the central office switching equipment, but it's not. It's the soup test doing this. It does this to indicate that it had a pre-trip failure. It means the ring tripped when the supervision test line put a high resistance across the line. It wasn't supposed to trip so soon. The test knows that it did, and that's why it puts this tone on. Let's call the supervision test again. Maybe it'll work this time. I got cut off because I was charged. I'm on ESS, which by 1978 had a 2-second supervision grace period. But still, if you had a supervision test that was flashing and the on-hook flashes were real short, sometimes the ESS would just take that as longer than 2 seconds off hook. In this case, it obviously did, because 10 seconds after the flashing was over, I got a dial tone. Here's a ring in an Avon Avenue panel. Notice the relay noise just when Newark cuts through. In February 1977, when I made the centralized Intercept tape, 2 of the calls actually involved 4As RPing out, Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. This first call to Pittsburgh goes from my east side line to Forest Hills
21233
to Pittsburgh 1,
4122,
previously known as 4121 back in 1970, to a panel. Ouch. That is what Ben and I came to know as the notorious O sender. Forest Hills had an MF sender that you would get sometimes that would send a 0 instead of a start. Needless to say, the Pittsburgh 14A is not going to appreciate this. This thing wasted an amazing amount of time and was almost impossible to troubleshoot.
We're sorry that because of a temporary equipment condition, your call did not go through. Will you please hang up and try again? This is a recording, 4122. We're sorry that because of a temporary equipment condition, your call did not go through. Will you please hang up and try again? This is a recording, 4122. We're sorry.
Yeah, the P-type recordings in 4As tended to have a lot of that clickety-clickety stuff. I think that had to do with the fact that trunks that had been held up for a long time would start flashing lights on the test board. Usually that wouldn't start happening until several minutes had gone by, but sometimes it would be premature. Ben has just whistled off a trunk from Bronx to Pontiac, Michigan 4A to get the P recording. But unlike most, this one is going to start doing the clickety thing way too soon.
We're sorry, your call did not.
Some of those noises we just heard, I am at a loss to explain. Okay, let's try Pittsburgh Intercept again.
Sorry, you have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service. If you feel you have reached this recording in error, please check the number or try your call again. We're sorry, you have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service. If you feel you have reached this recording in error, please check the number or try your call again.
Operator, may I have the number you're calling, please?
Yeah, 731-0000.
731-0000 is for outgoing calls only.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, that had the text I don't like, but I'll keep it in because of the tick-ka-ta. There are only so many of those. Here's Cincinnati Centralized Intercept via Forest Hills, Cincinnati 4A
5132
to a Crossbar 1.
We're sorry, but you have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service. If you feel that you have reached this recording in error, please check the number and try your call again. We're sorry, but you have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service. If you feel that you have reached this recording in error, Please check the number and try your call again.
Operator, what number are you calling?
421-9912.
421-9912 has been disconnected.
Thank you.
Before we leave Cincinnati, let me show you something I found on my tape. In the 20th century, the office code 958 was almost universally unassigned because it was a test code everywhere in the toll network and often locally as well. It was the number readback code in New York, for example. Now if we call 513-958, we got a single 4A tick, almost like it was going into one of the recordings. Recording doesn't seem to be coming on, though. Nice crosstalk. Well, maybe this is all it does.
Cincinnati. Hello?
Anyway, 958 into tandems would usually get somebody to answer. Some of them had a nice ringtone. This one had none. Let's take a few seconds and listen to the sound of silence in the long-distance world. Here's a call to a panel in Chicago made from my Long Island home in 1974. Via Hempstead,
5166.
Chicago 34A,
3123.
directly to the panel using the auxiliary sender. This, I think, is the only panel we ever found that had pseudo-modern tones.
number, please? What number, please?
We've been listening to the sound of 4A switches, revertive pulsing out to number 1 crossbars and to panels. To connect directly to a panel, the 4A has to RP, and so you're always going to get the tick, cut. But number 1 crossbar receives MF as well, and when a 4A connects to a number 1 crossbar, after sending MF, you hear just the usual soft tick of the 4A, and then the number 1 crossbar office that you're calling starts the ring and connects to the line in such a way that it very often sounds as if the ring is just sort of fading in. The following call goes from my east side line to New York 4,
2122,
to San Jose 4A,
4082.
to a number 1 crossbar in San Jose. That first ring is something we would hear a lot. In fact, the night that Captain Crunch put me on the 052 conference, shortly before he brought me in, he asked, "Are you on number 1 crossbar?" And I said, "Yes, how did you know?" He said, "Well, when you call number 1 crossbar, very often the ring sounds like it sort of fades in." And this is what he was talking about. Something similar tends to happen when you first connect to a busy signal. Very often the first tone that you hear will have a change of volume or timbre. Here's a call to a Detroit crossbar 1 that gets a busy signal. From my east side line to Forest Hills,
21233.
to Detroit 1 4A,
3132.
which MFs to the crossbar 1. What I'm referring to as the fade-in effect can be very hard to hear on a busy signal on a tape. And part of the reason is that my tape recorder, owing to the fact that the busy signals are so loud, tends to get into the act and start using its automatic volume control to change the level when it isn't really changing. So a lot of the tapes will have the busy signal timbre and level changing on every tone just because of the tape recorder. But this example, thanks to the fact that I've restored it a bit, sounds right. Here's a call to that same Detroit crossbar 1 where we get a ring, but we connect to the line in between rings, so you don't hear the fade-in effect. That line has some sort of equipment on it, perhaps an answering machine, that makes the ring sound rattly like that. Since we came in between rings, we were able to hear the subtle ticks that the number 1 crossbar is making right after the 4A cuts us through to it. So there are 3 ticks before we hear a ringtone. I'll repeat that. Yeah, the first one is the 4A cutting through to the crossbar 1, and the second two are coming from the crossbar 1 itself. I found another example of those 3 ticks being clearly audible calling Mark Bernay's number 1 crossbar exchange in San Francisco from my east side line. It goes over Forest Hills to San Francisco 1 4A
41515
to the crossbar 1. When a number 1 crossbar office is MF'd into by a 4A and then goes to AIS, you still hear 3 ticks, but the 2 ticks supplied by the crossbar 1 are different. So to be complete, here's an AIS call to a number 1 crossbar in Oakland. Via Forest Hills, Oakland 5 4A
4159.
to the crossbar 1.
The number you have reached, 532-0000, has been disconnected. 532-0000 has been disconnected.
Intercepting operator, the number is disconnected with no referral. May I help you? Waiting, disconnecting.
Let me take that last call and insert pauses to give me time to say what's going on. We're about to cut through to Forest Hills. Now we're on Oakland 5. That barely audible tick was Oakland 5 cutting through to the crossbar 1 after MFing the last 5 digits. The next tick is a relatively deep, low-frequency sound, and the only place you hear it in the network is number 1 crossbar starting to go to AIS. Here's that. There. What's next is the sound of the crossbar 1 cutting through to the AIS trunk. And now the AIS trunk will go off hook right at the beginning of the announcement, which of course makes another click.
The number you have reached, 532.
Okay, let's go back to calling Chicago. The following calls are from my Long Island home, which goes out on Hempstead, and Hempstead used to use Chicago 3.
3123.
But now, the entire Chicago routing system has been rearranged. There was a Class 3 office called Chicago 6, with its recording ID
3128.
Right, but that is now 3122 because they've made Chicago 6 the sectional center, and there's no split there. And so now Hempstead uses exclusively Chicago 6. Here's a call to a Chicago crossbar 1 that clearly shows you an example of the fade-in effect, this time on a reorder tone. It goes from my Long Island home to Hempstead
5166
to Chicago 6, which is now 3122, which MFs to the crossbar 1. Unlike Detroit and Oakland and San Francisco, Chicago doesn't have AIS yet. It still has the old centralized intercept. Here's a call to that same crossbar 1, which also demonstrates the fade-in effect on the first ring.
is a recording. The number you have reached is not in service at this time. If you think you might have dialed incorrectly, please try your call again. May I repeat, the number you have reached is not a working number. Thank you.
What number, please?
221-9960.
221-9960?
Yes.
I'm sorry, but we don't have such a number as 221-9960.
Thank you.
Here's another Chicago Crossbar 1 going to Intercept, and this call goes through the same way as the other two.
This is a recording. The number you have reached is not in service at this time. If you think you might have dialed incorrectly, please try your call again. May I repeat, the number you have reached is not a working number. Thank you.
What number, please? What number, please?
242-0000.
242-0000. I'm sorry, there's no such number.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, I think I've managed to find some good examples of what it really sounds like when a 4A is MFing into a Crossbar 1. Sometimes the ring just fades in like this. The busy tones often do the same thing. If you hit the line in between rings, and there's not a lot of static between rings, you can usually hear 3 soft but very distinct ticks, including the tick of the 4A. And when a number 1 crossbar is experiencing busy traffic, it's not at all uncommon to wait a good long time before the ring starts, hearing unrelated revertive pulsing while you're waiting. So far we've gotten machine intercept in Chicago 3 times, and each time it was a different recording.
This is a recording. This is a recording. This is a recording.
Those 3 are done by the same person. The tapes reveal that Chicagoland has a lot of intercept concentrators, and the recordings vary. Here are 2 more calls to the Chicago area from my Long Island Crossbar 5 line via Hempstead, Chicago 6,
312-2.
to a Crossbar 5.
This is a recording. The number you have reached is not in service at this time. If you think you have dialed in correctly, please try your call again. May I repeat, the number you have reached is not a working number. Thank you.
Sounded like it was about to go to the operator, but didn't happen. This was the CH6 exchange in Western Springs. Here we heard the Illinois Bell standard text for centralized intercept, but not one of their standard recorded voices.
This is a recording. The number you have reached is not in service at this time. If you think you might have dialed incorrectly, please try your call again. May I repeat, the number you have reached is not a working number. Thank you.
What number saying? What number calling?
One thing I can't help but notice about Illinois Bell's standard recordings for centralized intercept is that they have deliberately put a very long pause in the middle of the announcement.
This is a recording. The number you have reached is not in service at this time. If you think you might have dialed incorrectly, please try your call again.
What is this pause for?
May I repeat, the number you have reached...
Well, you know, I thought about it, and it must be that in spite of the fact that it says
This is a recording
right at the beginning, they still don't expect their customers to understand that there is not a live person on the line. And so I think the following is what Illinois Bell is anticipating that their customers will do.
This is a recording. The number you have reached is not in service at this time. If you think you might have dialed incorrectly, please try your call again.
Is this the operator? Hey, I'm down here at Wabash and Wacker. Can you return my dime, please?
May I repeat, the number you have reached is not a working number.
Oh, for Pete's sake.
That's got to be it. So before I close out this program, which is probably the last time in the long distance series that we will hear the tick-ka-ta of the auxiliary revertive pulse sender in 4As, I need to show you this rather anachronistic example which Bill told me about in 1978. It seems there was an office in Buffalo, New York that used to be a Crossbar 1, I believe, 644, which, well, it's now number 1 ESS, but listen to how this is going through. This goes from my Atlanta 88 ESS line to Atlanta 4E
404 3C
to Buffalo 4A
7164.
and, well, you can tell. In that example, you can tell that the 4A is revertive pulsing to an ESS, and I think this is the only place I've ever seen this being done. Tick-ka-ta, there you go. It's just an ESS instead of a panel or a Crossbar 1. Apparently, when they changed 644 from Crossbar 1 to ESS, they didn't bother having the 4A change the trunks. They just left everything as it was, and so it was revertive pulse before and still is. Here's another call to the same office. Yes, that was a supervision test, and normally when you go into the supervision test in a number 1 ESS, there are a few extra clicks at the beginning of the first ring. But here, for whatever reason, we didn't hear them. Maybe it's because the 4A adds a time delay before it cuts through, and so those extra clicks got obscured. But it usually does not sound like this. Now, the other thing, of course, is that the answer supervision obviously sounds local here. And the reason is this is a CCIS trunk. The trunk between Atlanta and Buffalo has been modernized such that there are no tones for supervision, no 2600, no MF tones. Instead, all of that is sent over a separate data channel. The first system that did that was called CCIS for Common Channel Interoffice Signaling. The first CCIS trunk group was between Chicago 7, the world's first number 4 ESS switch, and a brand new 4A crossbar switch in Madison, Wisconsin. That happened in 1976, and then for the next year and a half, Ben and I went out of our way not to record any calls that used CCIS. There were very few of them at first, but as time went on, we began to get them here and there. Now, CCIS was supposed to put an end to classic phone phreaking. What it really did was a little different from that, and you can hear that covered in early 80s Program 5. Here's one more call to the Buffalo 644 office, this time to a vacant number.
I'm sorry. The number you have reached is not in service or temporarily disconnected. The number you have reached is not in service at this time. This is a recording.
Wouldn't be dialing. Hello?
The operator was on a 2600 controlled trunk, and thanks to CCIS, you could actually hear the tone when she released.
Hello?
On a regular long-distance trunk, that tone would be filtered.
Hello?
Well, that's it for this segment. And believe it or not, I really do hope to do more narrated long-distance programs.
Oh, for Pete's sake.
Yes, it's true. There are more things I can cover. Thanks to Avery Grade for playing the Chicago guy at the payphone.